I don't think you realize who you're dealing with. Her voice was quiet but confident. I don't think you realize where you are. The manager chuckled, taking in her tattered backpack and plain clothes. This is a private gallery. The vernissage is for invited guests only. I have an invitation. Of course. And I'm Picasso, laughed the guard standing nearby. She turned and walked out without a word. An hour later, a black Cybertruck with personalized license plates pulled up to the gallery. A woman in an elegant evening gown stepped out. The same visitor who had been thrown out an hour earlier, followed by the most recognizable person in the world of technology. The administrator's face paled when he recognized Aurora Musk and her father, Elon Musk. The most interesting part is coming. Stay with us to find out how it all ends. In the meantime, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't lose it. A Manhattan morning greeted Aurora Musk with a cool April breeze. Her slender fingers, devoid of the usual designer rings, clutched a plain paper cup of coffee from a street kiosk. The daughter of the richest man on the planet walked down Fifth Avenue in faded jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her face was bare of makeup. Freedom, Aurora thought, feeling her shoulders relax for the first time in a long time. No security, no photographers, no waiting. Few knew that Elon Musk's daughter had inherited not only his sharp mind, but also his passion for art. Over the past 5 years, she has secretly funded dozens of artists from disadvantaged areas, but she never used her father's money to do so. Her personal foundation was created thanks to her own talent for investing. The phone in her jeans pocket vibrated softly. 23 notifications from her assistant, several missed calls from her father. They were supposed to meet today to discuss buying the legendary Aurora Gallery, her dream since she first saw a Basquiat exhibit there as a teenager. I'll call back in an hour. She typed a short message to her father and turned off the sound. Right now, Aurora wanted only one thing, to feel like an ordinary 30-year-old woman, without a last name, without responsibility, without the billions flashing in tabloid headlines every time she appeared in public. On the corner of Madison Avenue and 73rd Street, she spotted a small cafe, its windows decorated with vintage silent movie posters. Inside, it smelled of fresh croissants and strong coffee. The bell above the door jingled softly as she entered. A middle-aged man with a well-groomed beard and a suspicious gaze stood behind the counter. The few customers, men in impeccable suits and dresses, looked up from their newspapers and tablets. "Can I help you?" the barista asked in a tone that made it clear the only help he wanted to provide was to point the way out. "An Americano and a croissant, please." Aurora placed a $20 bill on the counter. The man did not move. "We just ran out of croissants," he said, although there was a whole pile of pastries on the tray behind him. "Then just coffee," Aurora smiled, deciding not to escalate the situation. The barista slowly glanced over her simple clothes, lingering on her worn sneakers. "Listen," his voice dropped, but still loud enough for other customers to hear. "This place caters to a certain crowd. I'm sure there's a Starbucks down the street." A murmur ran through the cafe. An elderly lady in a pearl necklace grinned, exchanging knowing glances with a man in an expensive suit. "Are you refusing to serve me because of my clothes?" Aurora asked calmly, although inside she was seething. "I'm simply offering you an establishment that better suits your capabilities." The 20 was still on the counter. Aurora wasn't about to make a scene, not today, when she finally felt free of her status. She took the bill and turned to leave, but stopped when she noticed a sign on the wall. "Exclusive vernissage, retrospective of Jean-Michel Basquiat. For invited guests only. Gallery Aurora, today, 19:00. Her heart skipped a beat. Basquiat was her passion, her inspiration, and Aurora was the gallery she was going to buy today with her father, to create a space for talented artists with no connections in the art world. "Do you know anything about this exhibition?" she asked the barista, pointing to the sign. He snorted. "It's the most prestigious event of the season. Only collectors and critics are invited. And believe me," he glanced at her clothes again, "there is a very strict dress code." "Thank you for the information," Aurora nodded and left the cafe. Manhattan was seething around her, a city of extremes, where luxury and poverty were within a block of each other. A few blocks away, she stopped at the window of an electronics store where dozens of screens were showing the news. One showed her father speaking at a conference on sustainable development. "We cannot build the future based on the prejudices of the past," Elon said, and Aurora couldn't help but smile. These were the words he had spoken to her when she announced her decision to create a foundation to support artists instead of following the standard path of an heiress to an empire. She continued walking, enjoying the anonymity. People passed her without recognizing her as the daughter of the man whose photo was flashing across screens around the world at that very moment. In her casual clothes, without makeup or designer accessories, She was just a woman walking down the street. Invisible. Free. Aurora turned onto a narrow Chelsea street where the Orem Gallery was located. The majestic turn-of-the-century building, with its marble columns and massive dark wood doors, looked like a temple of art. Workers were already bustling about at the entrance, setting up a red carpet and elegant banners bearing Basquiat's name. As she approached the entrance, she noticed the service door ajar. The impulsive decision came instantly. Why not take a look at the exhibition before it opened? After all, by evening, the gallery would be hers. With a slight movement, she slipped inside. In the cool, dim light of the gallery, Basquiat's works seemed to glow with their own inner light. Aurora walked slowly along the walls, examining familiar and unknown works by the master, stopping from time to time to take photos of the details she liked for her collection of ideas. "Hey you! What are you doing here?" A sharp voice made her turn around. A tall man in an impeccable suit was walking quickly towards her, his face twisted in irritation. "How did you get in here? The exhibition is closed." He grabbed her elbow with such force that it would surely leave bruises. "Security." "Sorry," Aurora said calmly, freeing her hand. "I just wanted to look at the work." To look? The man cast a contemptuous glance at her simple clothes. "Or to photograph something for counterfeit." "I'm a collector," Aurora tried to explain. "I have an invitation to the evening vernissage, but I was nearby and decided—" "A collector?" He laughed so loudly that it echoed throughout the empty room. "In these rags? Do you have any idea how much these works are worth?" "I can actually imagine," Aurora replied coldly. "The skull was sold at Sotheby's for $110.5 million in 2017, and Basquiat's early works on this wall are probably valued at around $30–40 million each." The man was momentarily confused but quickly regained his composure. "Smart homeless girl, huh? Read too much Wikipedia?" He grabbed her hand again. "The exit is over there." "I'm Aurora Musk," she finally said her name, which usually opened any door. The man stopped, looked at her for a long moment, and then burst out laughing. "Sure, and I'm Banksy. Go ahead, get out of here before I call the police." At that moment, a young man with a tablet in his hands entered the room. His simple black sweater and jeans contrasted sharply with the flashy luxury of the administrator's suit. "Mr. Blake, there's a courier with documents." He fell silent, noticing Aurora. "Sorry, I didn't know you had a visitor." "Not a visitor, an intruder," Blake snapped. "She came in through the service entrance. Claims she's Aurora Musk." The young man looked closely at Aurora, and something like recognition flashed in his gaze. "I'm Michael, the curator's assistant." He extended his hand. "Sorry for the misunderstanding." "What's wrong with you, Michael?" Blake said indignantly. "Do you really believe that Elon Musk's daughter would look like a homeless person and sneak into a gallery through the back door?" "I didn't sneak in," Aurora objected. "The door was open, and I don't think you realize who you're dealing with," Michael whispered to his boss. "I don't think you realize where you are," the administrator chuckled, looking again at her battered backpack and simple clothes. "This is a private gallery. The vernissage is for invited guests only." "I have an invitation," Aurora said firmly. "Of course, and I am Picasso." The guards who came up laughed. Blake nodded towards the exit. "Escort our Aurora Musk to the exit, and make sure the service door is closed." Michael watched helplessly as the guards approached Aurora. "Please, miss, don't make trouble," one of them asked quietly. Aurora straightened up, her eyes flashing with the steely determination she had inherited from her father. "It's okay, I'm leaving," she said, adjusting her backpack. "But I'll be back." "I'm shaking with fear," Blake laughed, ostentatiously checking the time on his expensive watch. "I still have 100 things to do before the vernissage for true art lovers." The guards politely but firmly escorted Aurora to the exit. Michael walked alongside her, his face expressing genuine regret. "I'm really sorry," he whispered as they reached the door. "Mr. Blake, he values status very much." "Don't apologize," Aurora answered quietly. "Not for him." She stepped outside and the doors of the Orem closed behind her. But instead of disappointment or humiliation, Aurora felt a strange relief. For the first time in her life, she had been treated exactly as any ordinary person would be treated if they dared to violate the sacred boundaries of the elite art world. Taking out her phone, she dialed the number. "Dad?" Her voice was calm and determined. "We need to meet urgently. I think I just realized why buying Orem is not just a good investment, but a necessity." The April wind picked up as Aurora paused on the steps in front of the gallery. Despite her outward calm, a storm of emotions was seething inside her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger that was rising inside her like a burning wave. This feeling was unfamiliar to her. Usually problems were solved with one phone call, one mention of a name. The phone vibrated in her hand. "Father?" "I'll be there in an hour." Elon said without preamble. Where are we meeting? At the Soho Grand, Aurora replied. I need to tell you something before we sign the final papers. Is there something wrong with the gallery? Father's voice became tense. Not with the gallery, with the people. She paused. See you in an hour. Aurora glanced at her watch. There was still enough time before her meeting with her father to try again, this time officially. She headed back to the main entrance of the gallery. There was a guard at the front door, not the same one who had sent her out a minute ago, and that gave her a tiny chance. Squaring her shoulders and lifting her chin, a gesture she had unconsciously adopted from her father, Aurora approached the door. Good afternoon, her voice sounded confident. I would like to speak with the curator of the exhibition. The guard gave her an appraising look. Do you have an appointment? No, but this concerns today's vernissage. The gallery is closed until this evening. Come at 7 if you have an invitation. He emphasized the last word. I have a business proposal for the gallery management, Aurora insisted. Leave your business card, they'll call you back, snapped the security guard, clearly accustomed to scaring off uninvited visitors. Aurora sighed. Of course, she didn't have business cards with her. She never carried them in everyday life. They attracted too much unwanted attention. Please tell me that Aurora M. came. The guard asked again. Just M, she repeated, choosing not to reveal her last name. It was a test of sorts. If the people at the gallery really knew about art and business, they would know her as a collector and patron, even without the famous last name. Okay, Miss M, the guard said with undisguised irony. I'll be sure to pass it on. Aurora was about to leave when the door opened. Michael, a young assistant curator who seemed to recognize her from inside the gallery, appeared on the threshold. Miss, he hesitated, avoiding pronouncing the last name. You're back. I would like to speak with your management again, Aurora said. Officially. Michael glanced nervously into the gallery, then back at her. This is not a good idea. Mr. Blake is very upset about the incident this morning. He has already given orders not to let you in. So I'm officially banned from the gallery? Aurora asked. Her voice remained calm, but a dangerous glint flashed in her eyes. No, not exactly. Michael was clearly uncomfortable. It's just a very busy day today, getting ready for the vernissage. I understand, Aurora nodded. But perhaps your boss would like to know that one of Basquiat's works in the third room is hung incorrectly. What? Michael looked worried. Which one? Untitled Necronosher 7, 1983. It's hanging at the wrong angle to the light source. Basquiat painted it in a certain light, and the wrong backlight distorts the combination of blues in the lower right corner. Michael looked both impressed and puzzled. How do you know this? I've been studying his work for 20 years, Aurora answered simply, and I went to an exhibition of his early work in Tokyo 5 years ago, where the curator gave a detailed account of the specifics of exhibiting each work. Michael hesitated, clearly torn between his professional duty and his superior's instructions. Mr. Blake hasn't listened to my hanging recommendations, he admitted quietly. He believes that art should adapt to the gallery space, not the other way around. Sounds like someone who has never created art, Aurora noted. You're right, Michael smiled for the first time. Look, I can't take you in now, but maybe you could come tonight. I'll put you on the guest list. That's very generous of you, Aurora replied softly. But I don't think your boss will be thrilled. He won't recognize us, Michael shrugged. Usually there are about 300 guests at these vernissages. No one knows everyone by sight. Thank you, but I prefer the honest way. Aurora took out her phone. Can I have your email address? I will send you some comments on the exhibition. It is up to you to use them or not. Michael dictated the address, looking at Aurora with respect. Who are you anyway, he asked. I mean, besides Elon Musk's daughter? Aurora finished for him. I'm the curator of a private contemporary art collection and the founder of a foundation to support young artists. But that doesn't matter, does it? She nodded toward the gallery. For people like your boss, only the cover matters, not the content. Not everyone is like that, Michael quietly objected. I know, Aurora smiled. That's why we're talking. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp voice coming from behind Michael. What's going on here? Blake appeared in the doorway, his face twisted in irritation. He froze when he saw Aurora. Are you still here? He exclaimed. Wasn't this morning shame enough for you? Mr. Blake, Michael intervened. This lady is simply... I see what this lady is doing, Blake interrupted, trying to impress my assistant to get into a private event. I'm sure this isn't the first time she's used this kind of trick. You are mistaken, Aurora said coldly. I came to discuss a professional matter. One of Basquiat's works requires some lighting adjustments. Blake laughed, looking pointedly at her simple clothes. Sorry, my dear, but curatorial lessons from a homeless woman are too much even for my sense of humor. I've been working in this gallery for 15 years, and every other imposter tries to prove that he understands art better than me. By this point, a small crowd had begun to gather at the entrance. Gallery staff and a few early arrivals, watching the unfolding scene with curiosity. Glad to entertain you, ladies and gentlemen. Blake spread his hands theatrically. But we only have a few hours left before opening. Can I at least know the name of the gallery owner? Aurora asked. I have a business proposition. A business proposition? Blake laughed again, louder this time, clearly playing to the audience. And what do you have to offer? Buy the gallery? Several people in the crowd chuckled. An elderly lady in an elegant suit whispered something to her companion, who shook his head disdainfully. Actually, that's exactly it, Aurora answered calmly, not giving in to the provocation. Blake froze for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. You know, baby, he said, lowering his voice, jokes are good in their time and place. And now you better leave on good terms, or your next stop will be the police station. Are you threatening me? Aurora raised an eyebrow. I'm protecting private property from unwanted visitors, Blake countered. And yes, it is a warning. Suddenly, an elegantly dressed middle-aged man emerged from the crowd. His bearing and commanding gait unmistakably indicated a man accustomed to power and money. What's the problem, Blake? He asked with a slight Italian accent. No problem, Mr. Rivera. Blake's expression instantly changed. Just a small misunderstanding with a visitor trying to get into a closed exhibit. Mr. Rivera, obviously one of the important guests, gave Aurora an appraising look. Unlike Blake, his gaze was not disdainful, more scrutinizing. And who are you, Signorina? He asked, addressing Aurora directly. My name is Aurora, she answered, deliberately leaving out her last name. Aurora, he repeated. Like the dawn, a beautiful name. And what brings you to our gallery in such an informal manner? I love art, Mr. Rivera, she said simply. Basquiat especially. And I have some comments about the exhibition that might improve the appreciation of his work. Rivera raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Comments from someone of your lifestyle? His voice was more curious than dismissive. Lifestyle does not determine the understanding of art, Aurora objected. By the way, Basquiat himself started out as a street artist, painting graffiti under the pseudonym Samo. I'm sure that at that time, many gallery owners would not have let him into their establishments. There was a moment of silence. Rivera looked at Aurora attentively, a barely noticeable smile playing on his lips. Knowledge of art history does not give you the right to disturb the peace in a private gallery, Blake intervened, feeling that he was losing control of the situation. Mr. Rivera, you have an appointment with the curator in the third room. Yes, Rivera nodded absent-mindedly, not taking his eyes off Aurora. But first I'd like to hear these comments. Sir, I assure you this is a waste of time, Blake insisted, casting a withering glance at Aurora. Your experts hung Untitled Nasher 7 at the wrong angle to the light source, Aurora interrupted. Basquiat painted this work under specific lighting, and the wrong backlight distorts the combination of shades of blue in the lower right corner. In addition, Crowned Head is placed too close to Angel, which creates a visual dissonance that the artist himself tried to avoid. In his notebooks published in 2015, there are notes about the need for breathing space between the works of this period. Rivera looked at her with undisguised amazement. Impressive, he said finally. You really know Basquiat. I've been studying him for 20 years, Aurora replied, since my father first took me to his exhibition. I was 10, and I fell in love with his work at first sight. Blake, Rivera said to the red-faced administrator, I think we should check these comments. Perhaps Miss Aurora is right, and the exhibit needs to be adjusted. But Mr. Rivera, there are only a few hours left until opening, Blake exclaimed. We cannot allow Basquiat's work to be displayed improperly, Rivera said firmly. Miss Aurora, would you be so kind as to take us to the paintings in question? Blake looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Michael had trouble hiding his smile. With pleasure, Signor Rivera. Aurora nodded, heading toward the door. But Blake blocked her path. I'm sorry, Mr. Rivera, but I can't allow this. His voice shook with barely contained rage. This person does not have access to the gallery. She has no invitation, no accreditation, and frankly, I doubt she is who she claims to be. What do you mean? Rivera frowned. She claims to be Aurora Musk, Blake blurted. Elon Musk's daughter. Look at her. It's absurd. Rivera slowly looked from Blake to Aurora, a new understanding in his eyes. Is this true? He asked. Aurora nodded silently. Unthinkable, Blake exclaimed. Musk's daughter wouldn't be walking around New York in rags and without a guard. She's an obvious imposter trying to get into the gallery and So what? Aurora interrupted. Steal priceless Basquiat works in front of a dozen witnesses? Or am I planning to plant a bomb? What exactly do you suspect, Mr. Blake? I don't know what you have in mind, Blake snapped. But I know you're lying about your identity. You demand that I prove who I am? Aurora asked coldly. Based on what? My clothes? My desire to visit the gallery without first informing the press? Common sense, Blake shouted. People in your position don't behave like that. And how do people of my position behave, Mr. Blake? Aurora's voice became dangerously quiet. Enlighten me. Rivera, who had been watching this altercation with growing interest, suddenly burst out laughing. Blake, I think you're painting yourself into a corner, he said. If this young lady really is Ms. Musk, you're making a serious mistake. And if she isn't, well, her knowledge of Basquiat is still impressive. Exactly, Michael intervened. Mr. Blake, maybe we should just let... Silence, Blake barked. You're fired, Michael. Pack your things. He turned to Rivera. Mr. Rivera, I am responsible for the security of this gallery and the integrity of the exhibit. I cannot have an unknown individual interfering with our work based on unsubstantiated allegations. An unknown person? Aurora smiled bitterly. You are right, Mr. Blake. I am indeed unknown to you, because you do not bother to know about the people who really move the art world forward. You do not know me because I do not go to your pretentious parties and do not give interviews to glossy magazines. But believe me, many in the art world know who I am. You're delirious, girl, Blake hissed. Security. Blake, Rivera said warningly. I wouldn't advise, but it was too late. 2 guards were already approaching Aurora. One of them, the same one who had escorted her out in the morning, looked embarrassed but determined. Ma'am, please come with us, he said, carefully taking Aurora by the elbow. Take your hands off, she said quietly but firmly. Ma'am, I said, take your hands off. Something in her voice, commanding, brooking no argument, made the guard instantly let go of her hand. He took a step back, clearly confused. Mr. Blake, Aurora turned to the red-faced administrator, you just publicly insulted me, questioned my character, and fired an employee for displaying elementary courtesy. Are you sure you want to continue in this vein? Absolutely certain, Blake spat. There's no place for imposters in Orem. Well, Aurora calmly took out her phone. In that case, I think I should contact the real owner of the gallery right now. Go ahead, Blake chuckled. This is Mr. Stanton, by the way, and believe me, he's very selective about his contacts. Mr. Stanton no longer owns Orem, Rivera interjected. All eyes turned to him. The deal closed this morning. The gallery has a new owner. Blake turned pale. What? But I don't know anything about it. Mr. Stanton promised to warn me if... I guess he didn't warn me, Rivera shrugged. Business is business. Miss Musk, he turned to Aurora, I think you'd better leave, but not because of this misunderstanding. I'm just sure you have more important things to do than this unpleasant scene. You are right, Senor Rivera, Aurora nodded, although I was hoping for a more constructive dialogue. Michael, Rivera said to the young assistant, please show Miss Musk out. I fired him, Blake objected, and I'm hiring him back, Rivera retorted calmly, as temporary representative of the new owner. Blake looked like he'd been punched in the gut. A murmur ran through the crowd, which had grown considerably by now. Who's the new owner? Blake managed to get out. Rivera smiled mysteriously. I think you'll find out soon enough. He turned to Aurora. See you soon, Miss Mask. Michael walked Aurora to the exit. Once they were out of earshot, he whispered, I don't understand what's going on, but it looks like Mr. Blake finally got what he deserved. Perhaps, Aurora answered evasively. By the way, who is Mr. Rivera? Marco Rivera, Michael explained. A major collector, owns several galleries in Europe. It's amazing that he stood up for you. Not surprising, Aurora shook her head. True art connoisseurs recognize each other regardless of appearance. They stopped at the foot of the stairs. What now? Michael asked. Are you really coming to the vernissage? Aurora looked at her watch. I have a meeting with my father in half an hour. And then, we'll see. Tell him I said hi, Michael smiled. I'm a big fan of his work in sustainable energy. I'll definitely pass it on. Aurora extended her hand. Thank you, Michael, for everything. You're welcome, he shook her hand. I hope Mr. Blake doesn't find out I let you in through the service entrance this morning. You let me in? Aurora raised an eyebrow. Not directly, he admitted, but I saw you on the street and left the door open. I recognized you right away. Saw you speak at a conference on artificial intelligence in the arts last year. So my masquerade isn't all that effective, Aurora sighed. Only for those who can look beyond the surface. Michael smiled. See you later, Miss Musk. Aurora headed towards the hotel where she was supposed to meet her father. The events of the day were taking an unexpected turn. First a cafe, then a gallery. The world of elite New York, where she was usually a welcome guest, suddenly showed her its dark side. And she didn't like this side. The phone in her pocket vibrated. A message from her father. I'm already at the hotel, and I have news that will interest you. Aurora smiled. Her father had always loved dramatic effects, a trait she had certainly inherited from him. But today she had stories to tell too. Stories that could change the face of the Orem Gallery forever. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice two men watching her from the sidewalk opposite. One of them picked up his phone and took a few photos. Are you sure it's her? Asked the second. Absolutely, nodded the first. We're going to have an interesting evening tonight. He typed a message and sent it along with a photo. Mr. Blake wants to know all her movements. Driving his expensive car a few blocks from the gallery, Blake received the message. His face twisted into a wicked grin. You think you can come into my gallery and humiliate me, Aurora Musk? He whispered. You'll soon realize who you're dealing with. The Soho Grand Hotel greeted Aurora with subdued lighting and impeccable service. The staff, accustomed to celebrities and the richest people on the planet, did not even blink an eye at the sight of a young woman in worn jeans and a simple t-shirt, confidently walking through the lobby to the elevators. Miss Musk, the concierge nodded slightly. Your father is waiting for you in the presidential suite. Aurora nodded, noting to herself that here, unlike the gallery and the cafe, she was instantly recognized, despite the lack of makeup and designer clothes. Professionalism, not prejudice, was what distinguished real high-class service. In the elevator, she finally looked at her reflection. Her hair was tousled, her cheeks were flushed from the cold wind, her eyes were slightly tired. But she also saw something that had not been noticed in the gallery. The confident look of a person who knew her worth, regardless of her outer shell. The elevator doors slid silently open on the top floor. The presidential suite took up an entire wing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, now shrouded in lilac twilight. Elon Musk stood by the window, his back to the door, looking out over the city. Even in his relaxed pose, in simple jeans and a black t-shirt, he radiated that special energy that made entire industries tremble at his decisions. How did your experiment with anonymity go? He asked without turning around. Decades of technological advances had taught him the value of silence, but he could always hear when someone entered the room. It's educational. Aurora came up to her father, stood next to him, also looking at the city. I learned how ordinary people are actually treated in elite establishments. Elon turned to face her, his eyes filled with understanding and something else. Determination. Tell me, he said simply. And Aurora told. About the cafe where they refused to sell her coffee. About the gallery where she was humiliated twice. About the young assistant who alone showed simple human respect. About Rivera, who seemed to know more than he was saying. Elon listened silently without interrupting. His face remained impenetrable, but his hands, clenched into fists, betrayed the storm of emotions inside. I've always hated snobbery, he finally said when Aurora had finished. People whose importance is determined by the brands they wear, not the content of their thoughts. He shook his head. But today it's happened to my daughter, and I can't ignore it. It's not me, Dad, Aurora said softly. I can give my name at any time and get access to anything. The thing is, I saw how people who don't have that opportunity are treated. Elon looked at her with pride, and for a moment Aurora saw in his eyes a reflection of the little girl who had once asked him why some people lived in huge houses and others on the street. You've always seen what others choose not to notice, he said quietly. You've never been like me in that way. I look forward to the future, and you look around to the present. I think I got it from my mother, Aurora smiled. Definitely, Elon nodded. She would be proud of you today. They fell silent, both thinking about the woman who had left their lives too early, but who had left an indelible mark of compassion and sensitivity to the pain of others in Aurora's heart. So what now? Aurora broke the silence. The Orem Gallery is ours? The papers were signed this morning, Elon nodded. Stanton took the money and drove off to his new villa in Tuscany. It's funny that he didn't even ask what we were planning to do with the gallery. He doesn't care, Aurora shrugged. For people like him and Blake, art is just a commodity, an investment. They don't feel the soul of the works. Well, Elon straightened up, his eyes lighting up with that special fire that millions have seen when he pitches new technologies. It's time to shake up the New York art world a little. Are you ready? For what exactly? Aurora asked, although she could already read on his face that the plan had matured. To teach Mr. Blake an unforgettable lesson and to show everyone present at the opening how easily they judge a book by its cover. Aurora smiled. She liked it when her father got into the game. Behind that smile was the story of dozens of corporations forced to change their strategy after Elon Musk decided something needed to be shaken up. "You've already planned everything, haven't you?" she asked. "I've sketched out the basic outlines," Elon answered modestly, "but I need your help with the details, especially with the part about art." "I'm listening." Elon gestured for her to sit down, and they settled into comfortable chairs by the panoramic window. "First, we need to show up for the opening with style," he began. "No warning, no phone calls. Just walk in and see how our friend Blake reacts when he sees you in a completely different guise." "You want me to change?" Aurora raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Wouldn't that contradict my position that clothes don't determine a person's worth?" "Not at all," Elon shook his head. "On the contrary, we will prove that the same person can look different but still be themselves. This will demonstrate the absurdity of their judgments." Aurora thought about. There was logic in her father's words, but something still bothered her. "I don't want revenge on Blake," she finally said. "I want to change the system that allows people like him to abuse people." "Does one exclude the other?" Elon leaned forward, his eyes sparkling. "Aurora, you have always been an idealist, and I love that about you. But sometimes to change a system, you need to create a precedent, a bright, memorable one that will be talked about for a long time. And what do you suggest?" "I suggest we put on a show." Elon reached for his phone and quickly typed something. "I've already contacted your friend Michael. An interesting young man, by the way. He's helping us with some details." "You contacted Michael?" Aurora was amazed. "When did you manage to do that?" "While I was waiting for you," Elon shrugged. "Don't look at me like that. You know I don't like wasting time." "Dad," Aurora shook her head, "you are incredible." "No," he said seriously, "you're incredible. I just know how to use resources. Speaking of resources," he stood up and walked to the door leading to the next room. "I have a gift for you. Well, not exactly a gift, more like an element of our plan." Elon opened the door, and Aurora saw a rack of dresses, but not ordinary dresses. These were masterpieces from the best fashion houses in the world. Nearby were suitcases with cosmetics and accessories. "You brought a whole fashion boutique here?" Aurora couldn't help but laugh. It was so typical of her father. When he took on something, he always did it in a big way. "Not me," Elon denied. "Your friend Maria. I just called her and explained the situation. She rushed over with a whole team of stylists. They're waiting in the next room, ready to transform you. If you agree to the plan, of course." Aurora walked up to the dresses, running her hand over the exquisite fabrics. Among them was a modest but elegant black dress, exactly what she would wear if she were going to a formal vernissage. "I like this," she said, pointing to the black dress. "Nothing fancy, just elegance and style." "An excellent choice," Elon nodded. "But that's not enough. We need something that will make everyone here freeze." He walked up to the counter and picked out another dress, a deep blue, almost black, with tiny crystals scattered across the fabric like stars in the night sky. The simple cut in the front and the exquisitely open back were a combination of classic and daring. "This," he said, "this dress is just made for you." Aurora took the dress and put it on herself. The reflection in the mirror showed an amazing transformation. Even in jeans and a t-shirt, just holding this dress, she already looked different. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "But isn't it a little too impactful?" Elon finished for her. "That's the point, my dear. We want the contrast between you in the morning and you in the evening to be so striking that no one can believe that they are the same person. That's the only way we can clearly demonstrate the absurdity of judging by appearances." Aurora thought about the dress. She had never been one to impress with her appearance, preferring to be judged by her actions and ideas. But today was a special occasion. "Okay," she finally decided, "but on one condition." "Anything," Elon nodded. "We're not just going to make a splash or put Blake in his place. We need to use this moment to announce how the gallery will change under our management. About programs to support young artists. About access to art for all segments of the population." Elon smiled, and in his smile, Aurora recognized her reflection. The same determination, the same desire to change the world for the better, only expressed differently. "That's what I meant by precedent," he said. "You'll turn a scandal into a manifesto." "Brilliant." There was a quiet knock on the door. "Aurora, this is Maria," a female voice said. "We're ready if you agree." Aurora exchanged glances with her father, doubt flashing in her eyes, but only for a moment. "I agree," she answered loudly. "Come in." The door opened and an elegant middle-aged woman entered the room, followed by a team of 3 people with suitcases of professional cosmetics and hairstyling tools. Darling, Maria hugged Aurora. I'm so glad to see you. Your father told me about your experiment and how terribly you were treated. We'll do everything to make the entire New York elite regret their snobbery tonight. Thank you, Maria, Aurora smiled. But remember, I don't want to look like a walking advertisement for designer brands. I want to look like me, only my best version. Of course, my dear, Maria nodded. We will highlight your natural beauty, not mask it. You will look like a real Aurora Musk, a woman who can wear anything from jeans to couture and still remain herself. Elon tactfully retreated to the door. I have a couple of calls to make while you're busy with the transformation, he said. Let's meet in the lobby in an hour. In an hour and a half, Maria corrected him. Real art takes time. Elon nodded and walked out, taking out his phone as he went. Aurora knew that look. Her father was up to something more than just a spectacular appearance at the vernissage. The next hour and a half flew by in a friendly atmosphere of female laughter and conversation. Maria, a well-known fashion stylist and longtime family friend, told funny stories about celebrities she had worked with, deftly maneuvering between topics to keep Aurora from getting hung up on the upcoming confrontation. The team worked with astonishing efficiency. Someone was doing makeup, someone was doing hair, someone was preparing accessories. Aurora watched her transformation with a little irony, but also with interest. After all, she rarely allowed herself such a complete transformation. Something tells me that Dad is planning something more than just showing up at the vernissage and announcing the change of ownership of the gallery, Aurora said thoughtfully, while Maria secured the last curls in her elegant but not pretentious hairstyle. Your father always thinks big, Maria answered evasively, but he didn't reveal the details even to me. There's only one thing that worries me, Aurora admitted. I don't want this to look like a rich girl's revenge on someone who was wronged. I want this to be a story about justice and equal opportunity. And so it will be, Maria said confidently, because you are you. It doesn't matter what dress you wear. Your values and beliefs don't change with your clothes. Aurora smiled gratefully. Maria always knew how to find the right words. Done, the stylist announced, taking a step back and assessing the result. Look at yourself. Aurora turned to the mirror and froze. Before her stood a woman of astonishing beauty. Not flashy, not provocative, but that deep, aristocratic beauty that is born of confidence and inner strength. The blue dress perfectly hugged her figure, emphasizing the grace of her lines. The makeup was impeccable, light, almost imperceptible, but completely transforming the face. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, gathered at the back in an elegant bun. Is it still me? Aurora whispered. It's you as you've always been, Maria answered softly. Just dressed for the occasion. There was a knock at the door and Elon walked in. He froze on the threshold, looking at his daughter. Wow, was all he said. Just wow. Dad, Aurora smiled shyly, you embarrass me. This is a compliment not only to you, but also to Maria's team, Elon noted. You did a fantastic job. With such material it was not difficult, Maria answered modestly. Now it is time for you to go. I would not like to miss the main event of the evening. Elon offered his arm to his daughter, and they left the room. In the elevator, Aurora noticed that her father had also changed his clothes. His usual jeans and t-shirt had given way to an impeccably fitting dark gray suit. You look like you're at a presentation of the new SpaceX rocket, she noted. I feel the same way, Elon admitted, like before launching something revolutionary. When they left the hotel, Aurora expected to see one of her father's expensive cars, maybe a Tesla Model S or even a Roadster. Instead, a massive Cybertruck was waiting at the entrance, its angular shape glinting in the streetlights. Really? Aurora couldn't help but laugh. Cybertruck? In the middle of Manhattan? Today is an evening of contrast, Elon winked. Plus, I want everyone to know from afar who's arrived. When they got into the car, Aurora noticed that her father was unusually silent. Are you nervous? She asked. You, the person who regularly speaks in front of thousands of people and changes entire industries? I'm not nervous, Elon shook his head. I'm just thinking about my mother. She would be proud of what you're doing today. Aurora squeezed his hand. Her father rarely spoke of her mother, and every mention was precious. You know what she always told me? Elon continued. Remember that your power is a responsibility, not a privilege. You live by that principle, even though you don't know it's from her. I think I've always felt it, Aurora answered quietly. Her presence in my life, even when she was gone. They were silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The Cybertruck was inexorably approaching the Orem Gallery, where the New York elite was already gathering for the most high-profile event of the season, the Basquiat Vernissage. By the way, Elon said suddenly, I forgot to show you something. He took out his phone and opened some application. Remember when you said that one of Basquiat's paintings was hanging incorrectly? I asked Michael to send me a photo of the exhibit. So what? Aurora asked with interest. I showed these photos to an expert from Sotheby's. He confirmed your words 100%. Moreover, he said that improper lighting not only distorts the perception of the painting, but can also damage the pigments that Basquiat used in this work. I knew it, Aurora exclaimed. Blake has no idea what a risk he's putting priceless works of art at. Well, Elon smiled, he'll have to find out about it soon, from the new owners of the gallery. The Cybertruck stopped in front of the Orem Gallery. Silhouettes of guests could be seen through the panoramic windows. The muffled hum of conversations and the sounds of a jazz quartet could be heard. Are you ready? Elon asked, looking at his daughter. Aurora took a deep breath, gathering her courage. This wasn't just a moment of personal triumph. This was a chance to change the rules of the game, to show that true art and a person's true worth are not determined by appearance. I'm ready, Shawen, she answered firmly. The doors of the Cybertruck opened, and Elon and Aurora Musk stepped onto the red carpet at the Orem Gallery. A father and daughter team ready to change not only the evening, but the entire approach to how the art world treats people who don't fit into the elite standards. The photographers on duty at the entrance immediately perked up. Flashbulbs flashed like a thunderstorm in clear weather. Musk's name instantly flashed through the crowd gathered at the entrance. Inside the gallery, Blake, annoyed by some drink mishap, was scolding a waiter when he noticed a sudden movement at the entrance. He turned and saw them. Elon Musk, one of the most powerful men on the planet, and next to him, a dazzling young woman whose face seemed vaguely familiar. What's going on? He muttered, taking a step toward the distinguished guests. I don't remember inviting... And then his eyes met Aurora's. The same eyes that had looked at him from under her disheveled bangs that morning. The same eyes full of dignity, even under the hail of his insults. The blood drained from Blake's face as he realized who it was he had thrown out of the gallery hours ago. Who he had humiliated in front of the visitors. Who he had called an imposter. Oh my God, he whispered as Elon and Aurora Musk headed straight for him, cutting through the crowd of guests that parted before them like the sea before a biblical prophet. Rivera appeared next to Blake, his eyes shining with understanding and barely contained amusement. It seems your morning visitor has returned, the Italian remarked, and this time in company that even you cannot help but notice. Blake ignored his words, frantically trying to think of what to say, how to apologize, how to save the situation, and most importantly, his career. But there was no time to think. Elon and Aurora Musk were already standing in front of him, both with expressions of polite interest on their faces. Mr. Blake, if I'm not mistaken, Elon said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes, I heard you had quite an interesting meeting with my daughter today. A deathly silence reigned in the Orem Gallery. The music died down, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the waiters with trays of champagne froze, as in the children's game, Freeze Freeze. All eyes were riveted to the center of the room, where a scene was unfolding that would grace the front pages of all the society columns tomorrow. Blake Thompson, who had been basking in his own self-importance this morning, now looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face had turned ashen, his tie had suddenly become too tight, and his expensive jacket was unbearably hot. Mr. Musk, he finally managed, ignoring Aurora as if her presence was too painful a reminder of his mistake. What an unexpected honor. We didn't know. We weren't warned. What exactly should I warn you about? Elon asked politely, his voice calm but his eyes flashing dangerously. That I'm coming to the Basquiat exhibition? Or that my daughter looks different than she did a few hours ago? Blake swallowed, his gaze darting to Aurora, then back to Elon, like a cornered animal looking for an escape route. There was a misunderstanding, he began. A misunderstanding? Aurora asked softly, taking a step forward. Her voice was quiet, but somehow audible to everyone in the room. You called me an imposter. You assumed I was homeless. You kicked me out of the gallery twice. You humiliated me in front of visitors. You call this a misunderstanding? By this point, a tight ring of spectators had formed around them. Guests of the vernissage, journalists, critics, collectors, all of them hungrily catching every word, every gesture of this drama. Smartphones were raised, filming what was happening. This scene was already being broadcast live on dozens of Instagram accounts of influential people in New York. Miss Musk, Blake tried to compose himself, his voice professionally polite. I offer my deepest apologies for this gross misunderstanding. If only I had known... Exactly, Elon interrupted, and there was a steel edge to his voice. If you only knew that my daughter was Elon Musk's daughter, you would treat her differently. But isn't that the whole problem with our society, Mr. Blake? Some doors open for people just because they have the right name, the right clothes, the right bank account. and other doors remain closed to those who don't, no matter how talented or knowledgeable they are. Blake opened his mouth but found no words. Marco Rivera, an Italian collector who had expressed interest in Aurora that morning, stepped out from the crowd. "Mr. Musk?" He nodded respectfully. "Your daughter impressed me this morning. Not with her last name, which I confess I had no idea about, but with her deep knowledge of Basquiat. She pointed out errors in the exhibition that I, as a collector with 30 years of experience, had missed." "Thank you, Senor Rivera," Aurora smiled. "I appreciate that you saw me as a person, and not just a shell." Suddenly, a woman with a glass of champagne flew out of the crowd. The same elderly lady in a pearl necklace who had sneered contemptuously in the cafe that morning when Aurora was refused service. "What hypocrisy!" she cried, her face contorted with rage. "You masks think you can buy everything and everyone. First cars, then space, now art. And what next? Our souls?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Some supported the woman with shouts of approval. Others hissed disapprovingly. Aurora took a step towards her face calm, but her eyes dark with barely contained emotion. "I remember you," she said quietly. "You were in that cafe this morning. You laughed when they refused to serve me because of my clothes." The woman trembled, but quickly pulled herself together. "I was laughing at something completely different," she tried to defend herself. "And anyway, it was a private conversation. You have no right—" "Rights?" Aurora smiled bitterly. "Let's talk about rights. About a person's right to respect, regardless of how he dresses. About the right to be judged by his knowledge and actions, and not by the size of his bank account. About the right of art to be available to everyone, and not just to a select circle of snobs who see it only as an investment." The woman turned pale. Someone behind her began to applaud, and the applause was picked up, spreading throughout the hall until it turned into an ovation. "Michael!" Blake suddenly shouted, pointing at a young assistant who had pushed his way through the crowd and stood next to Aurora. "You let her in through the service entrance this morning, didn't you? You planned this whole thing. It's a plot to discredit me." Michael looked startled by the sudden accusation, but Aurora placed her hand on his shoulder in a protective gesture. "Michael had nothing to do with this," she said firmly. "The door was open, and I walked in. But even if he had opened it on purpose, it wouldn't change the essence of what happened next. You, Mr. Blake, showed your true colors. He didn't." "This is absurd," Blake cried, his voice rising an octave. "You can't just come in here and start this circus. You have no power in this gallery." "Oh, but you're wrong about that, Mr. Blake," Elon interjected, his voice quiet, but each word falling like a stone in the quiet of the room. "We have all the power in this gallery. As of this morning, the Aurum Gallery is officially owned by the Aurora Musk Foundation." The room was so silent you could have heard a pin drop. Blake stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. "It's impossible," he croaked at last. "Mr. Stanton would never sell the gallery without my knowledge. I'm his right hand, his—" He stopped short when he realized he'd said too much. "His accomplice?" Elon raised an eyebrow. "In concealing the real provenance of some of the gallery's exhibits? Or in artificially inflating the prices of works of art through fictitious auctions? Or perhaps in tax evasion through offshore schemes?" Blake's face twisted in horror. There was a murmuring around him, and the whispers were not in his favor. What are you talking about?" He tried to protest, but his voice sounded too uncertain. "Mr. Stanton shared some very interesting information with us during the gallery sale," Elon continued calmly. "Information that will be of great interest to the IRS and the FBI. But we're keeping that information to ourselves for now, until personnel decisions are made." "Are you blackmailing me?" Blake hissed. "No." Elon shook his head. "We're giving you a choice. The gallery's new owner's first decision is to relieve you of your position. Immediately. But," he paused, "we're offering you an alternative." "What other alternative?" Blake's gaze darted between father and daughter like a cornered animal. "Work in our new educational center," Aurora answered. "Not in management, of course. You'll be helping children from disadvantaged areas learn to understand art. That same Aurora you kicked out of the gallery today was once inspired to the path of art by a tour guide. Perhaps you can be that inspiration for someone else." Blake looked like he'd been asked to clean toilets. "I won't work with these kids," he said through gritted teeth. "I have a reputation, connections. I'll find another position." "I'm afraid it's going to be difficult," Elon said softly. "You see, the story of how you treated my daughter is already going around the web." He showed the screen of his phone, where an influential news site had already published a story with a screaming headline, "Elon Musk's daughter kicked out of gallery for inappropriate appearance." A few hours later, she became its owner. In an hour, every gallery in New York will know about her. In every gallery in the country. Blake turned even paler, if that was even possible. You're going to ruin my career because of a misunderstanding? His voice trembled with poorly concealed fear. We're not the ones who are going to ruin your career, Mr. Blake. Elon shook his head. You did it yourself when you decided you could judge a person by their appearance. When you decided your position gave you the right to humiliate others. Suddenly, a young man in a gallery employee's uniform pushed his way through the crowd. Sorry for the intrusion, he addressed Elon and Aurora, but there was an incident at the entrance. What happened? Aurora asked worriedly. A group of young people are trying to get into the vernissage. They say they learned about the change of gallery owners and the new policy of accessibility of art. Security won't let them in because they don't have invitations. How many are there? Elon asked. About 15 people, the employee replied. Some of them don't look very presentable. So they're dressed like I was this morning? Aurora asked with a slight smile. Yes, something like that, the employee said, embarrassed. This is a provocation, Blake exclaimed. Someone is trying to sabotage the vernissage. This is a closed event for the chosen ones. It was, Aurora said firmly. From now on, the Aurum Gallery is open to all who love art. Take me to them, she said to the employee. The dense crowd of guests parted, forming a passage. Aurora, accompanied by her father and a confused Michael, headed for the exit. Behind them, unable to resist their curiosity, a line of people present stretched out. At the entrance to the gallery, security guards held back a rowdy group of young people, a variety of ages, nationalities, and clothing styles. Some held rolled-up canvases, others tablets with digital works. One guy, an African-American in his 20s, had a battered bag of spray paint slung over his shoulder. What's going on here? Aurora asked, stepping out onto the porch. These people are trying to get in without invitations, miss, one of the guards replied. They claim you invited them personally. I didn't say that, the young man with the spray can stepped forward. I said that the new owners of Aurum announced a program to support young artists. We came to find out how to take part in it. How did you find out about the program? Aurora was surprised. I announced it just a few minutes ago. Twitter. The guy showed the screen of his phone. The news has already gained thousands of reposts. It says here that Elon Musk's daughter is opening a gallery for artists regardless of their origin and status. Aurora glanced at the screen and saw an amateur video, filmed by one of the guests just a few minutes ago, where she announced her initiatives. The video has already gained hundreds of thousands of views. Suddenly, a short, middle-aged man with a beard and a worn denim jacket burst out from behind the guards. He burst onto the porch and stood face-to-face with Aurora. You, he exclaimed, pointing at her with a trembling finger. Didi, I know you. You are the same girl I threw out of my cafe today. Aurora recognized the barista, who refused to serve her in the morning. Yes, it was me, she confirmed calmly. I didn't know. The barista looked completely crushed. If I knew who you were, that's the point, Aurora interrupted him gently. You shouldn't treat people differently based on who they are. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone has a right to a cup of coffee, she smiled, and to visit an art gallery. The barista looked at her, his eyes filling with tears. My business is at risk, he whispered. Someone left a negative review about how I treated you. Now it's spreading across social media. Several regular customers have already canceled orders, and the comments are calling me snobby and arrogant. I'm afraid this is just the beginning. My reputation, which I've spent years building, is crumbling before my eyes. Aurora felt a lump rise in her throat. She never wanted her experiment to lead to anyone suffering. I'm so sorry, she said sincerely. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I just wanted to feel what it was like to be an ordinary person in a world where status and appearance matter. And did you feel it? The barista asked bitterly. Yes, Aurora answered quietly, and it was a sobering experience. The barista lowered his head and his shoulders slumped. What should I do now? How can I fix what I've done? Aurora thought for a moment, then her face lit up. How about making your cafe an inclusive space, she suggested. A place where anyone can get a cup of coffee, no matter what they're wearing or how much money they have in their pocket. We could collaborate, host exhibitions of emerging artists in your cafe, organize educational programs. The Aurora Musk Foundation is ready to support such an initiative. The barista's eyes widened in surprise. You're offering me a partnership? We all make mistakes, Aurora said softly. It's not that we make mistakes that matters, but how we correct them. At that moment, the young graffiti artist who had first spoken to Aurora stepped forward. I'm sorry, but we didn't come here for the drama, he said. We came for the art, for the chance you promised. Aurora turned to him, her attention completely focused on the young man. What is your name? She asked. Marcus, he replied, clearly nervous under her scrutiny. Marcus Johnson. And you are an artist? Graffiti, mostly, he shrugged. Nothing special, but Basquiat also started with graffiti, Aurora noted softly, under the pseudonym Samo. Marcus looked up at her in surprise. Do you know about this? Of course, Aurora smiled. I've been studying his work for 20 years. She turned to the guards. Let them through, please. All these young people are my guests. The guards looked at each other, clearly doubtful. Miss Musk, but the protocol. From now on, there is a new protocol in the Aurum Gallery, Aurora said firmly. Any artist who wants to show their work has the right to meet with the curator. Any art lover, regardless of their appearance or status, has the right to visit our gallery. Behind her, she heard the approving cries of the guests who had poured out onto the porch to watch the scene. At that moment, Blake emerged from the crowd of guests at the vernissage. His face was pale but determined. You can't do that, he exclaimed. This is an elite gallery, not a community center. We have a reputation, traditions. Traditions? Aurora asked. Are you talking about traditions of arrogance and snobbery? Traditions of excluding anyone who doesn't meet your narrow standards? Those traditions need to change, Mr. Blake. And we're starting right now. In front of everyone present, she walked up to Marcus and extended her hand to him. Welcome to Aurum, Marcus. Show us your work. The young man shook her hand hesitantly, then gathering his courage, opened his backpack and pulled out a small sketchbook. Aurora took it and began to leaf through it, her eyes widening in amazement. This is amazing, she whispered. You never went to art school? I couldn't afford it, Marcus said simply. Instead, I studied the works of great masters online and practiced on the walls of abandoned buildings in the Bronx. Aurora handed the sketchbook to her father. Elon leafed through it slowly, his face expressing an unusual admiration. You certainly have talent, he said, but you lack technical training. That's why we're opening an educational center, Aurora intervened, so that talented people like Marcus can have a chance to develop their talent under the guidance of professionals. She turned to Blake, who was still standing on the porch, his face contorted with impotent rage. Mr. Blake, you have a choice, Aurora said loudly so that everyone could hear. You can be part of this change, or you can leave. Decide right now in front of everyone. Blake looked around, assessing the situation. The crowd of elegantly dressed guests mingled with a group of young artists from the street. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for his decision. Their eyes were filled with different emotions. Curiosity, condemnation, hope. With a sharp movement, he tore the tie from his neck. Forget it, he shouted. You think you can buy art like you buy everything else? You think a few $1 million gives you the right to decide what real art is? He turned his wild gaze on Marcus. And you think your scribbles on the walls are art? You think you can stand in the same league as Basquiat just because you do graffiti? He snatched the sketchbook from Elon's hands and threw it hard on the ground. This isn't art. This is nonsense. You're all nonsense. And you, he pointed his finger at Aurora, you're just a spoiled rich girl who decided to play at social justice because you have nothing better to do. There were murmurs of outrage from the crowd. Marcus rushed to pick up his sketchbook, his face burning with humiliation. Aurora looked at Blake, disappointment in her eyes. She had expected a lot, but not this explosion of pure rage and contempt. You've just proven why the art world needs to change, she said quietly. In your person, it has become cold, elitist, disconnected from life. Art should unite people, not divide them. Sentimental nonsense, Blake spat. Art is not charity, it's business, and a very tough business. For you, perhaps, Aurora nodded. And that's why you have nothing to do with him anymore. You're fired, Mr. Blake, and this time, no options. She turned to Marcus, who had picked up his sketchbook and was now clutching it to his chest as if it were something infinitely precious. I'm so sorry, she told him. He had no right to do this to your work. Nothing, Marcus shrugged, but it was clear he was more hurt than he was letting on. I'm used to this kind of attitude. But you shouldn't, Aurora said firmly, and you won't anymore. She turned to Michael. Michael, as of this moment, you are appointed creative director of the Aurum Gallery. Your first task is to organize an exhibition of the work of these young artists. Give them space, support, everything they need. Michael looked stunned. Me? But I don't have any management experience. You have something more important than experience, Aurora interrupted. An open mind and the ability to see talent where others see only social status. She turned to the crowd of guests who were watching the events unfold with undisguised interest. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new era of the Aurum Gallery, she announced loudly. An era when art will once again become a bridge between different worlds and not a wall dividing them. I invite you not only to witness these changes, but to become active participants in them.